The arena was silent except for the soft hum of the alien crowd's anticipation. They stood in the stands, eyes fixed on the battlefield below, waiting for the fight to reach its climax. Among the fighters was Lyra, a warrior from the planet Othar. Her armor gleamed under the bright lights of the arena, her weapon, an ancient sword, gripped tightly in her hands. Lyra was known for her skill and speed, but today, she faced a challenge that even her great strength might not be able to overcome. Across from her stood the Zorathian champion, a massive creature from a planet torn apart by war. His body was built like a mountain, thick muscles rippling under his dark, scarred skin. His eyes were cold, focused, and relentless. The Zorathian's reputation as the galaxy's most fearsome warrior had been earned over countless battles. Today, he added Lyra to his list of opponents. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the crowd's gaze pressing down on her. She could hear the whispers in the stands, feel the tension in the air. Everyone expected a swift victory from the Zorathian. Lyra, however, wasn't ready to give up just yet. The fight had only just begun, and she still had something to prove. The Zorathian lunged at her, swinging a massive battle axe. The blade whistled through the air, and Lyra barely had time to react. She raised her sword just in time to block the strike, the force of the blow sending a jolt through her arms. She stumbled backward but quickly regained her footing, her heart pounding. She had trained for moments like this, but the Zorathian's strength was overwhelming. Every time their weapons clashed, she felt the strain on her body. She couldn't afford to make a mistake. The crowd roared, urging the fighters on, and the atmosphere in the arena grew heavier with every passing second. Lyra's breathing quickened as she carefully watched the Zorathian's movements. He was slow, but powerful. His attacks were brutal, designed to overpower her in one clean strike. She had to be faster, smarter. The Zorathian raised his axe again, this time aiming for her head. Lyra barely dodged in time, rolling to the side to avoid the deadly swing. The ground beneath her feet was slick with the dust of countless battles, making every movement more difficult. She pushed herself back to her feet, her legs trembling from the strain. She needed a plan. The Zorathian was too powerful for a head-on attack. But there was one thing she had that he didn't: agility. Her speed had always been her greatest weapon, and now it was her only hope. Lyra feinted to the left, hoping to draw the Zorathian into a mistake. He took the bait, swinging his axe with all his might. She ducked low, narrowly missing the edge of the blade. As the Zorathian's weapon came crashing down onto the ground, Lyra saw her opportunity. She lunged forward, aiming for his side. Her sword scraped against his armor, leaving a shallow cut. It wasn't enough to cause real damage, but it was enough to make him hesitate. The Zorathian snarled, turning to face her again. This time, his movements were slower, more deliberate. He was growing frustrated. Lyra could see it in his eyes, the certainty that this fight was just another victory in his long line of triumphs. But she couldn't let him think that. With a quick sidestep, Lyra danced around him, trying to keep him on the defensive. She struck again, this time aiming for his leg. The blow landed with a sharp clang, but it wasn't enough to slow him down. The Zorathian retaliated with a wild swing of his axe, forcing Lyra to retreat. The crowd's cheers grew louder, the alien spectators on the edge of their seats, eager to see who would emerge victorious. Lyra's breath was coming in ragged gasps now. Her arms ached, and her muscles screamed for relief, but she couldn't stop. Not yet. She had never faced an opponent like this before. No matter how fast she moved, no matter how well she timed, her strikes, the Zorathian's brute force kept pushing her back. Her mind raced. She had to think of something. If she didn't finish this soon, she would be the one lying in the dirt, defeated. Another axe swing came at her, faster than the last. This time, Lyra couldn't avoid it. She raised her sword in an attempt to block, but the force of the strike sent her spinning off balance. Her sword was knocked from her hands, and she fell hard onto the ground. The wind knocked out of her. Lyra lay there for a moment, dazed, her vision blurring. She could hear the Zorathian's heavy footsteps approaching. His axe dragged across the dirt, and she knew what was coming. She was helpless, unable to move. The Zorathian's shadow loomed over her, and for the first time, she felt the cold grip of fear. It was over. She had fought with everything she had, but it hadn't been enough. Her eyes closed as she braced for the final blow, the end of her life. The crowd's cheers faded into a dull roar in her ears. But all she could think of was the Zorathian's axe coming down on her. But then, something unexpected happened. A sudden whistle filled the air, followed by the sharp hiss of something, flying fast and true. Lyra didn't have time to react. The arrow sliced through the air, and in an instant the Zorathian's body went stiff. His eyes widened in surprise, and his axe fell to the ground with a clatter. The champion staggered back, blood pouring from the wound in his chest. He took a few unsteady steps, his breath ragged, before collapsing to the dirt in a heap. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes flew open, and she stared in disbelief at the fallen champion. The arena was dead silent for a moment, as if the crowd couldn't believe what had just happened. Lyra, still on the ground, couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene in front of her. The Zorathian, the mighty champion who had been seconds away from ending her life, was dead. Her gaze turned toward the source of the arrow. In the shadows of the arena, standing calmly as if nothing had happened, was a figure she hadn't noticed before. A human. He was tall, his dark hair messy but determined, and his piercing eyes were focused entirely on the fallen champion. The figure slowly lowered his bow, his expression unreadable. He hadn't even broken a sweat. For a moment, Lyra didn't know what to think. This human who had just saved her life was as much an enigma as the battle they had just fought. Who was he? Why had he intervened? The crowd's stunned silence stretched into uneasy murmurs. The alien officials on the sidelines looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. Lyra, still on the ground, struggled to regain her breath. But as the human stepped forward, his boots thudding softly on the dirt, Lyra found herself wondering one thing: just who had come to her rescue and why. The arena was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by the murmurs of the crowd as they slowly realized what had just happened. The Zorathian champion, once a towering figure of strength, lay motionless on the arena floor, the blood pooling. Around his body was a stark contrast to the dust and dirt of the battlefield. The air felt thick with shock, the spectators unsure of what to make of the sudden turn of events. Lyra sat frozen, her heart still racing from the battle and the rush of disbelief. The last thing she had expected was to be saved by a human. The sounds of the arena faded into the background, she turned her gaze to the mysterious figure who had taken the Zorathian down with a single arrow. The human stood with the calmness of someone who had seen it all, his bow still raised but lowered now, as if it were nothing more than an extension of his body. Lyra blinked, struggling to process what had just happened. Her breath was still, uneven, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she had been spared by a force beyond her understanding. The human's face was stoic, his sharp eyes studying the arena around him. He was tall, wearing a simple tunic and armor, and he carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. There was no sign of panic or even excitement, only a calmness that seemed out of place in such a chaotic situation. Lyra's instincts told her to remain alert, but curiosity tugged at her. Why had this human intervened? Was he an ally? Or had he done this for reasons of his own? The alien officials who had been standing at the side of the arena now began to stir. One of them, a tall and imposing figure with violet skin, stepped forward. His voice boomed across the arena, demanding attention. "Who dares to intervene in the sacred battle of our people?" he called, his tone sharp and commanding. The human didn't flinch. He simply lowered his bow completely and took a few steps forward, his eyes still locked on the fallen Zorathian. Lyra could hear the tension in the air. The officials were waiting for an explanation, their eyes filled with suspicion. But the human offered no answers. He simply continued to stand there, as if he had expected this reaction. His silence only made the officials more uneasy. Lyra stood, up slowly, feeling the strain in her legs from the earlier fight. Her body was sore and her mind was still racing. She looked at the human, then back at the alien officials. There was a growing sense of discomfort among the spectators, their confusion mounting with every passing second. Was this human here to fight? To prove something? Or had he come for something else? Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the human spoke. His voice was low and calm, yet there was an authority to it that made the crowd fall silent once, again. I was merely passing through, he said, his eyes never leaving the fallen champion. I saw a battle and I intervened. No one should die today. Not without reason. Lyra's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. His words didn't make sense to her. No one should die? Was that the reason he'd killed the Zorathian? She had thought the human would explain more, but instead his words seemed deliberately vague. The days that followed the unexpected interruption in the arena were filled with uncertainty. Lyra's life had been spared, but the question of who had saved her, and why, hung heavy in the air. She had never imagined that a human, of all beings, would be the one to rescue her from death. As much as she tried to push the thought aside, she couldn't ignore the feeling that her fate was now tangled with his. Kyle, the human who had taken down the Zorathian champion with such precision, remained a mystery. He hadn't spoken much after his brief conversation with the officials, and the guards had escorted him to a holding area, under watch, as the council decided what to do with him. But even in captivity, Kale remained calm. He never seemed concerned, never showed fear. It was as though nothing in this strange world could shake him, and that intrigued Lyra more than she cared to admit. The next day she found herself walking through the corridors of the arena complex, her mind restless. She had to know more about Kale. Who was he? Why had he come to the arena? And why, when everyone else stood idly by, had he chosen to act? Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to find one of the alien guards, his dark green armor reflecting the harsh light of the overhead lamps. Lady Lyra, the guard said with a bow, his voice respectful yet cold. The human is requesting to speak with you. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had expected him to remain silent, to stay hidden as the officials decided his fate. But now, he was asking for her? She nodded, signaling for the guard to lead her to him. As they walked through the complex, Lyra couldn't help but wonder what Kyle wanted from her. The last time they had spoken, he had been calm and detached, as if their brief exchange hadn't meant much to him. Yet now, he had requested a meeting. The guard stopped at a heavy door, one that led to a small windowless room. He motioned for Lyra to enter. Taking a deep breath, Lyra stepped inside, her hand instinctively resting on the hilt of her sword. Kale was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall. His bow was resting beside him, and he was cleaning the string with a piece of cloth. There was no sign of panic in his demeanor, only a quiet focus. Lady Lyra, he greeted her calmly, his voice soft but strong. Thank you for meeting with me. Lyra studied him for a moment, unsure of what to say. There was something about him that made her feel both at ease and on edge. His presence was different from the warrior she had known. He didn't carry the weight of arrogance or pride. He simply seemed grounded. But why? You saved my life, Lyra said, her voice steady but laced with curiosity. Why? Kyle didn't immediately respond. He continued to work on his bow, his hands moving with practiced ease. Why? He repeated, as though contemplating the question. Because it was the right thing to do. Lyra frowned. The answer was too simple. But why would a human care about saving me? You don't know me. Kyle finally looked up, meeting her gaze. His eyes were sharp and thoughtful, not the eyes of a stranger, but something deeper, something more. It's not about knowing you, he said. It's about seeing someone in need and doing what you can to help. Lyra was silent for a moment, trying to process his words. You're not from here, she said at last, her voice softer now. You're not like the others. Kale gave a small smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. No, I'm not. But that doesn't mean I'm any less capable. Lyra couldn't argue with that. Kyle had certainly proven his skill in the arena. He was a formidable archer, and his calmness in the face of danger was something she hadn't seen often, even in the strongest warriors of her own kind. "You're here for something," Lyra said, her voice firmer now. "What is it? Why did you come to this arena?" Kale's expression shifted slightly as though considering how much he should reveal. "I'm not here for the arena," he said slowly. "I'm here because I was called. There's a conflict brewing, something far bigger than what happens in these walls, and I've been sent to stop it." Lyra's curiosity only deepened. "A conflict? What kind of conflict?" Kale stood up, brushing the dust from his tunic. "One that could destroy everything if it's not stopped in time. The people here, the officials, they don't see the bigger picture. They're too focused on their own power, their own agendas. But there are others out there who want to tear it all down. Planets, civilizations, everything." Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known that there were greater threats in the universe than the challenges her people faced, but hearing it from a human, someone who had just appeared out of nowhere, was unsettling. "Why didn't you tell the officials this?" Lyra asked, stepping closer to him. "Why didn't you tell them what's really going on?" Kale's gaze darkened, and his tone grew serious. "Because they won't believe me. Not until it's too late. I don't have time to convince them. I can't waste time with politics, I need action." Lyra nodded, understanding more than she had expected. Her people had often been caught in the web of politics, bound by alliances and treaties that did nothing to prevent the real dangers lurking in the galaxy. Perhaps Kale was right. Maybe the officials wouldn't listen until they saw the destruction for themselves. "So what now?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale glanced at her, his eyes steady and unwavering. "Now we prepare. We get ready for what's coming. I can't do this alone. I need someone who can think like I do. Someone who knows how to fight. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up for what's right." Lyra's heart raced as she considered his words. She had never thought of herself as someone who could change the course of something so large, so dangerous. But something in Kale's words stirred something within her, a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt in a long time. "You want me to join you?" she asked, her voice strong now. Kale gave a nod, his expression unreadable. "Yes. I can't do this without you. You have the skills, the strength, and you've already shown that you're willing to stand up for what matters." Lyra didn't answer immediately. She had always fought for her people, for her planet, but this was different. This was about something far bigger than her personal battles. It was about the fate of countless lives, of entire worlds. Could she really risk everything for this cause? Finally, after a long silence, Lyra spoke. "I'll help you," she said, her voice firm and resolute. "But I have one condition." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I want to know everything, no secrets. If we're going to fight together, I need to know exactly what we're up against." Kale nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I'll tell you everything. But for now we need to move quickly. Time is running out." Lyra looked at him, a sense of determination building inside her. She had made her decision. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in a long time she felt like she was doing the right thing. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Lyra and Kale were about to face a challenge unlike anything they had ever imagined. The days that followed Lyra's decision to help Kale were filled with preparation. She had always fought for her people, for her planet, but this was something new. A larger conflict loomed on the horizon, one that could destroy everything she had known. Kale had warned her, and now, the weight of his words pressed heavily on her shoulders. Kyle's presence in the arena complex remained under close guard. He had been permitted to stay, but only because the officials had yet to fully decide what to do with him. He was still an outsider in their eyes, a human who had interfered in something far more significant than they could understand. But Lyra wasn't concerned with the officials. They could make their decisions later. She had made hers. They had decided to team up, and now it was time to begin. The first few days were filled with training. Lyra had always considered herself a skilled warrior, But Kale's methods were different. While she focused on the physical aspects of combat, speed, strength, and precision, Kale taught her something new: strategy, patience, and the importance of understanding the enemy before rushing in. His way of thinking was unlike any warrior she had met. He didn't rely on raw power. He relied on his mind. As the days passed, Lyra found herself learning more than she ever expected. Kale showed her how to think several steps ahead, how to anticipate the movements of an opponent before they made their move. He taught her how to remain calm under pressure, how to use the environment to her advantage, and how to be unpredictable. The combination of her natural talent and his knowledge made them an unstoppable team. But it wasn't just in training that Lyra found herself changing. She began to see Kale in a different light. At first, she had seen him as just a human, a stranger who had saved her life in the arena, nothing more. But now, she realized that he was more than that. He wasn't just an outsider. He was someone who had seen the world in a way she never had. He had traveled across galaxies, fought in battles she couldn't even imagine, and witnessed things that had shaped him into the person he was now. Lyra found herself drawn to him, not just because he had saved her, but because he was unlike anyone she had ever known. He was calm when the world around him seemed chaotic, focused when everything else was falling apart. And he didn't judge her for her past, her victories, or her failures. Instead, he treated her as an equal, a fellow warrior, not someone to be admired from a distance. But as much as Lyra admired Kale, there was still a part of her that couldn't fully trust him. She wasn't sure. The night was still, the stars above a blanket of silence in the vast sky. It had been several weeks since Lyra had made the decision to fight alongside Kale, and in that time, they had trained harder than ever. They had learned to anticipate each other's moves, to think as one. The bond between them had grown stronger, and with each passing day, Lyra found herself trusting Kale more. Still, there were questions in her mind, questions about him that remained unanswered. Kale had spoken of a great conflict, of powerful factions threatening to take control of everything, but he had been vague, never revealing the full extent of what he was fighting against. Tonight, as they sat together by the campfire, Lyra decided it was time to learn more. She had to know everything if she was going to be fully prepared for what lay ahead. Kale sat across from her, his face illuminated by the flickering flames. His bow rested beside him, a reminder of the weapon that had saved her life more than once. He had been a quiet, mysterious presence since they had first met. But now Lyra was beginning to see past the surface. She could tell that there was more to him than just the skilled archer. There was a depth in his eyes, a story he had not yet told. "You've never told me everything," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "About why you're really here. About who you really are." Kale's expression remained unchanged, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. He shifted slightly, and for a moment Lyra thought he might avoid answering. But then he spoke. "I told you I'm here to stop a great conflict," he began, his voice steady. "But that's only part of the story. There's more. Much more." Lyra's curiosity piqued. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on him. "Tell me. I need to know." Kyle hesitated for a moment, as though weighing his words carefully. Then he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I wasn't always like this," he said, his voice low. "I wasn't always a soldier, an archer, a man who lives for the fight. I was once part of an elite force, an army tasked with protecting the galaxy. We were trained to fight, to protect the weak, to maintain peace. But peace, it doesn't last." Lyra stayed silent, listening intently as Kale continued. "I was part of a unit that was sent to a planet, one that had been ravaged by war for years. The people there had suffered so much, and our mission was to help them rebuild, to protect them from those who sought to destroy what little they had left. But the mission didn't go as planned. We were betrayed." Lyra's eyes widened, the weight of his words sinking in. She had heard of such things: betrayals, broken alliances, corrupt forces. But to hear it from Kale, someone she had come to trust, made it all the more real. We were ambushed, Kale continued, his voice harder now. The people we were supposed to protect turned on us. They weren't the innocent victims we thought they were. They had been manipulated, used, as pawns in a larger game, and we, my team and I, became their enemies. I was the only one who made it out alive. Lyra felt a pang of sympathy for him. She had known loss before, but she could not imagine the weight of losing an entire unit, of seeing everything he had believed in crumble before him. "That's why you're so different," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "That's why you don't trust easily. You've seen the worst of people." Kyle nodded, his eyes distant. "I've seen what people are capable of when they're pushed to their limits, but I've also seen the good in them. That's what keeps me going. It's what keeps me from giving up." Lyra didn't speak for a moment, letting his words settle in the air. She understood now. Kale wasn't just fighting for a cause. He was fighting for redemption, for justice. And perhaps in his own way he was still trying to make sense of the betrayal that had shattered everything he had once believed in. "But what does this have to do with the conflict you're fighting now?" Lyra asked. "Why are you involved in all of this? What's the bigger picture?" Kale met her gaze, and for the first time, Lyra saw a flicker of something vulnerable in his eyes. "The betrayal I experienced, it was just the beginning. There's a larger force behind it, something more dangerous than anything I've faced before. They're the ones who have been manipulating events across the galaxy. They've been pulling strings, creating chaos and destabilizing entire worlds." Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had known that the galaxy was full of dangers, but this was different. She had never heard of such a force, one that was hidden, operating from the shadows. "They call themselves the Ascendants," Kale said, the word heavy with meaning. "They believe that the galaxy can only be saved by one ruling power, and they'll do anything to make it happen. They don't care who they have to destroy to get what they want." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The Ascendants. She had heard rumors of such a group, whispers in the dark corners of the galaxy. But to hear that they were real, that they had the power to manipulate events on such a massive scale, was terrifying. "They have their hands in everything," Kyle continued, his voice growing darker. "Politics, trade, even the military. They're everywhere. And the worst part is they don't care about the people they destroy in the process. They'll burn entire planets to the ground if it means achieving their goal." Lyra's mind raced. She had fought many battles, faced many enemies, but nothing like this. The Ascendants weren't just enemies. They were a force of destruction, an ideology that threatened the very foundation of everything she knew. "Why haven't they taken over already?" Lyra asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Why are they still in the shadows?" Kyle's expression hardened. "Because they're waiting. They're patient. They've been building their power for years, and now they're ready to make their move. They have armies, weapons, alliances, everything they need to bring down anyone who stands in their way." Lyra took a deep breath, her mind processing the information. This was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy itself. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Lyra asked, her voice sharp with frustration. "We've been training together, and you've known all along what we're up against." Kale looked at her, his eyes filled with regret. "I didn't want to involve you in this. I didn't want you to become another pawn in their game, but now I realize that I can't do this alone. I need you, Lyra. I need you to help me stop them." Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had always fought for what was right, but this was something else entirely. The Ascendants were a threat like no other, and if they didn't stop them, the entire galaxy could fall. "I'll help you," Lyra said, her voice steady with resolve. "But we do this together. No more secrets." Kale nodded, a look of gratitude crossing his face. Together. The weight of their mission settled between them. It was no longer just about survival. It was about saving the galaxy. And as Lyra looked at Kyle, She knew that this was only the beginning. They were about to face something far bigger than either of them could have. The weight of their conversation lingered in the air as Lyra sat by the fire, staring into the flames. She had known there were dangers in the galaxy, countless threats that her people faced, from natural disasters to power-hungry warlords. But the Ascendants, they were different. They weren't just seeking power, they were willing to destroy everything to get what they wanted. And Kale, the quiet human who had saved her life, was now her ally in a battle that would shape the future of the galaxy. The next day, they prepared. Kale had told her what needed to be done, and they both knew that the time for waiting was over. The Ascendants were growing stronger with each passing moment, and if they didn't act quickly, the entire galaxy could be lost. They made their way to the nearest city, a bustling place of trade and diplomacy. It was where the leaders of various planets came to meet and discuss the future of the galaxy. But it was also a place of danger. Many factions had their eyes on it, and the Ascendants had a strong presence here. The city's leaders, though unaware of the true threat, had unknowingly allowed the Ascendants to infiltrate their ranks. "We need to move quickly," Kyle said, as they walked through the city's busy streets, blending in with the crowd. "We can't let them know we're coming. If they realize we've found them, they'll stop at nothing to destroy us." Lyra nodded, her senses heightened. She had fought many battles, but this was unlike anything she had ever faced. She was no longer just a warrior defending her people. Now, she was part of something much bigger, a force standing against an enemy that could destroy entire worlds. As they walked, Lyra couldn't help but notice the difference in the city. The atmosphere felt tense even though the streets were filled with merchants and travelers. She saw the way people looked over their shoulders, how they spoke in hushed voices. There was something unsettling about the place, something hidden beneath the surface. They made their way to a secluded corner of the city, where a small, unassuming building stood. This was where their allies were waiting, the people who had seen the Ascendants for what they truly were and had been working to stop them in secret. Kyle had trusted them, and now Lyra had no choice but to trust them as well. Inside, the room was dimly lit, with a large table in the center covered in maps and holographic screens. Several individuals sat around the table, their faces grim as they discussed their plans. Lyra and Kyle took their seats, and the imagined. The battle for the future of the galaxy had begun.